comes a bang. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunattu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Is there a rebirth? If so, what is it that is born again? Whoever dies is born. So, the Jivatma is the one that is born. So, when a new physical body is adopted by the Jivatma, it is called birth. And when the Jivatma departs from this gross body, it is called death. Meaning that the union with the next body is called birth, and departure from that is called death. So birth and death, both of them belong to this gross body. So in this gross body, there is what is called a subtle body, Sukshma Sharira. So what we see through our sense organs and experience is Sthula Sharira or gross body. What keeps this alive is something different from this body. That's called Sukshma Sharira or subtle body, because when death takes place, for some time this body remains intact. Otherwise, the transformation will take place later on, but for a while, sometimes you don't even know the person is alive or not. That means that there was something that was here that kept this body alive. By departure of it, the body is lifeless. So there is something that imparts life to this body. As long as it is there, body is alive. When it departs, body becomes lifeless. That is called subtle body, called Jivatma. The Atma identified with the subtle body is called Jivatma. Atma alone is called Jivatma, when identified with subtle body, and then gross body through subtle body. And whatever it is that keeps these two gross and subtle bodies together is called prarabdha or destiny. When that prarabdha karma comes to an end, this subtle body departs from here. This body becomes lifeless. The karma takes this Jiva-atma to the next destination, where he will be born in another embodiment. So this is how the scriptures explain the process of birth and death. Because the Jiva does not die. What dies, if at all, is this body. But the indweller of the body does not die. He transmigrates from one indwelling to the other, like we change a house. And when you leave this house, you take all your belongings with you. Go to the new place. Similarly also, when this Jiva departs from here, he carries all the samskaras, impressions, the result of all his experiences, the karma that he has performed, he carries that in the form of samskaras or impressions. With that he goes to the next body. Therefore, each one of us from the birth is a unique person. No two individuals are identical, even though they may be identical twins, but otherwise they are still different personalities. And what we are is determined by our past. Each one possesses a unique nature which is the result of the past karma, past history. Each one has a different history. Therefore, each one has a unique nature. And that's what makes us different from each other. So this is how the birth and the death are explained. Is Jivatma who departs from this body, that phenomenon is called death, takes up a new body, that is called birth. And this process goes on as long as there is karma. This karma in fact propels me to depart from this body, take up a new body. So when all the karma is exhausted by the self-knowledge, not otherwise, there is no other way to exhaust karma. So by self-knowledge, vidyate hridaya granthi, kshiyante chasya karmani, chidyante sarva samshayaha, kshiyante chasya karmani. In this Upanishad we will see this mantra, that when tasmin drashte paravare, when the self sees the para or Paramatma identity between the Jiva and Paramatma, then all the karmas are exhausted, all the bondage is gone. So knowledge, that is how, is what in fact eliminates the need for the rebirth. Until then, this process goes on. Does it give you? So in case you did not get any further question on that? No? Okay. Also, how do some people remember about their previous births? Very rare. When a person dies, all the memory is gone. And therefore, we start with a clean slate, sort of, in the next birth. So it's an unusual thing that someone remembers the past birth. As a general rule, we lose all the memory when we depart from this body. Memory belongs to brain death, everything is gone, which is a great blessing. To not remember the past birth is a great blessing, I tell you, although you may be fascinated by how nice would it be if I remember my past. Who knows whether the past is worth remembering or not? Remembering what happened in this birth is difficult enough for me to deal with. If I remember past, perhaps I'll go crazy, and so it's good that we lose all the memory is gone at the time of death, and we are born with samskara, but no specific memories. In some case it may happen that the newborn, that person remembers. There have been cases. But that's most unusual phenomenon. Usually one loses all the memory, which is good. Don't ask for remembering your past birth. It is a great blessing by God that we don't remember. Sometimes wish that we don't remember the past for our own things, because sometimes it's so bothering. So it's good. Any further question on this? No. Yeah.
But is it not also said that with respect to spiritual practices, in every birth, we pick up from where we left in the previous birth?
So the point is, Lord Krishna says in the 6th chapter of the Gita, we pick up the thread of where we left in the past. Tatratam buddhi sanyogam labate paurvadehikam. Paurudehikam, what was in the previous birth, he gets that thread and gets connected. What Lord Krishna means is that your spiritual progress continues. Nahi kalyanakrit kaschit durgatim tat gacchati. Lord Krishna says, one who has commenced this path, he never suffers a fall, he always rises. So even though we may not remember the past, we brought the samskaras from the past, and as Lord Krishna says, we continue where we concluded in the past. The example is like you start writing a letter at night, letter is incomplete, next day you start from where you left off and not begin. And that's how in this birth we begin from where we left off. That is generally, because that's why each one of us is different from each one, because we have a different history. At the same time, we are quite fortunate, to be exposed to this teaching, exposed to be here, etc. is a rare thing. And that is because we have brought with us something from the past which qualifies us to receive this blessing. So, nahi kalyana krit kaschit durgatim tat gacchati. Lord Krishna says, "O my dear Arjuna, one who has begun on this path does not suffer a fall, he continues like an escalator. Once you start, first step, you'll go up. Some escalator is faster, some are slower, but escalator means that you will certainly rise. That's what Lord Krishna says. Microphone.
So based on this, there is an aspect of memory that is with the mind, and there is an aspect of memory that is, let's say, with the subtle body. So how do we, is there a way to distinguish between the two? Or let's say what I'm hearing right now, the knowledge that I am hearing, how do I know if this just stays in the mind or if it really has its impressions on the subtle body?
Mind is part of subtle body. So mind and subtle body are not different. The memories are in the mind in the form of impressions. And when something happens in the present, it arouses that stored impression in the form of memory. So every experience leaves its residue, a samskara or an impression. And when something happens to arouse that, then we remember that past experience. It's likely that we will forget, but you cannot have memory of something that you have not experienced in the past. I cannot have memory of what you have experienced. You cannot have memory of what you have not experienced also. So memory always is of the previous experience. Yasmruti sa anubhava purvika, it said that the memory is all preceded by experience. And the impression are left in the mind. Mind and subtle body are the same.
So then we can say that over even across lifetimes, we are really carrying all the memory of our previous lifetimes, right?
In a way, yes. And so presently what we are is a build-up of all that past. You mentioned in the morning that we must control our senses and not react to a situation. not react to a situation, but we should respond to a situation. Reaction is different from response. So, every situation may call for a certain response. Whether to respond or not is our choice. But a situation may expect us to respond. So here the example is, suppose someone breaks a rule like jumping traffic signal or throwing garbage on the road. Should we react or as common citizens? You could very well be. But if someone jumps a traffic light, I don't know how you will, stop that person. Or someone throws garbage from his car, you can't do anything. And so you cannot pick up battles with people, it is difficult to try to bring everything in order by trying to make everybody orderly. Best you can do is someone throws garbage, pick it up. Like Mahatma Gandhi when traveling the train, he used to travel in third class, those days third class, now they are in second class. So all kinds of passengers are there. It's a crowded train. The passenger in the berth across where Gandhiji was sitting, from a village, this was for him cold. So he just threw, he spat right there. Gandhiji took a piece of newspaper, cleaned up, threw away. So that fellow got angry. Says, who are you to do this? He did it again. So Gandhiji again, piece of paper, that fellow did it a number of times. And every time Gandhiji did this, it's called responding to situation. Reacting situation will be you try quarreling with it. What are you doing there? Then that's what people do, and you may as well do that. I don't say you should not do that. But Gandhiji's ways were to transform the people. So when next station came and Gandhi was going, got down, so hundreds of people, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. Then this fellow realized who this person was. He fell at his feet and said, I'm very sorry for what I did. You don't feel sorry. Take a vow that you won't do it again. And if someone does it, you will clean up. This was so his style was this, that you will not spit. And you find someone doing it, you will clean up. So that's called responding to situation. I'm not saying you should do this, but this is how he did. Reacting would be to quarrel with that person, which also may be in order. I'm not saying you should not do that. But that usually people don't accept the mistakes that they make and they will try to justify and whatever. Here the person was transformed. By this response that he showed, Mahatma Gandhi was transformed. I'm sorry for what I did. So, if someone jumping the traffic signal, I don't know what you can do, throwing garbage in the road, should we react as common citizens? If you can, yes. Without picking up quarrels, etc. But it is a good thing to be a public servant, and try to respond to a situation. In the West, they will do this. Indians don't do this much. The Western people, they will, jump into, if they see some injustice going on, they'll jump into that and try to, correct that, etc. So, here we usually do not want to take much trouble, and so leave the trouble to them. I'm not saying what you should do, I'm just describing what people do, that's all it is. And so I don't know what you can do for jumping the traffic signal. It's already gone. What you can do as far as the garbage is concerned is perhaps you can pick up. That fellow may see that and may throw more garbage. If he pick up again, he may throw more garbage. We don't know, but you have to look at the situation and act wisely, that's all I can say. Cannot say what you should do. You yourself decide what is the best thing to do. While attending today's session on Sadhana Panchakam, I learned that there are only 4 Adi Shankara Peetham. My question is, what is that Peetham at Kanchipuram? Is there any affiliation with other Peethams or not? There is a view that there are only 4 Peethams that Adi Shankaracharya established in 4 corners of the country. North, Joshimath; south, Sringeri; east, Puri; and west, Dwarika. So the 4 Shankara Matha that Shankaracharya ji is said to have established. So then how do you explain the Kanchi Matham? Other 4 people won't accept this. They say that Shankaracharya himself came in India, so their explanation is that Jagadguru himself came in India. So, but this dispute remains, and I don't know. Our sense of history is rather poor in India. So we don't leave much evidence, and it's difficult to determine what is what. So we have 5 Peetham, and we as common people respect all the 5. That's all it is. We are not doing Vedic karma. Sannyasa is renunciation of Vedic karmas. Bhagavan Bhashyakara insists on sannyasa for moksha. What is sannyasa in today's context? Either you call it Vedic karma, you can call it kartavya, the duty. By Vedic karma, what is meant is nitya naimittika karma. So Vedas enjoin upon each individual the duties that he or she should perform every day and on special occasions. Every day is called nitya karma, on special occasions naimittika karma. And therefore, Vedas look upon the life of an individual as life of performing duty, for returning the favor that we have received at the time of birth. So apparently, when we are born indebted. So, jayamano ye brahmana tribir runavan jayate. A brahmana individual is born with 3 debts. That is the Pitru Runa, Dev Runa, Rishi Runa. You can add 2 more. Manushya Runa and Bhuta Runa. So 3 are made 5 ultimately. But the Vedas look upon our life as sustained by the rest of the universe. The rest of the universe consists of the Devaloka, where Devatas are there, Pitraloka, where the departed souls are there, Bhuloka, where the other human beings are there, the world of other creatures like birds, trees, plants, and finally the gurus. So therefore, there is one Brahmaruna that we should every day recite Vedas or Shiruna. We should study and teach Vedas. We should serve or do our duties for ancestors and parents. We perform the daily homa, offering to devatas. Our duties, householders, are supposed to also, when somebody comes to home, abhyagata, then you should offer him food, and if necessary, the night halt, bed and bed and breakfast. So these are the householder's duties as looked upon by the Vedas. And that's what keeps me connected to the rest of the universe. By doing these duties, I am returning the favor that I am receiving from them. Because other human beings also contribute in my life, like farmers by doing what they do, the teachers, and all the people by doing what they do are directly or indirectly contributing to my life. The birds and the plants and trees also indirectly contribute to my life. Every living being, wherever it is, either directly or indirectly contributes to my life. Other human beings also do, ancestors do, devatas do, rishis do. So I am indebted to all these people, and the duties are enjoined upon human being to perform as offerings to these 5 people, 5 entities. So renunciation will be that this is called duty or kartavya, which we have to do. Kartavya means that which should be done. Thus the Vedas enjoin these duties upon us, which we are supposed to do. It's called obligatory duty because we are obliged to do that. And if we fail to do, it will also create a sense of guilt in us. Because we typically grow in the environment of duty. Duty towards parents, duty towards family, duty towards children, elders, other members of society. And when we fail to perform the duty, there is a sense of guilt in us. Sometimes people come to Gurukulam for study, but they left their family, left the mother and or father, and they feel guilty that I left them home. Swami said, then go back, finish your duties and then come, because otherwise you have a sense of guilt in you. And so now the duties, when I fail to perform, will create a sense of guilt. Therefore, in sannyasa, the Vedas give an official consent that you can give up all your duties. So sannyasa means renouncing, not karma, renouncing all duties. All karmas were in the form of duties, the nitya, naimitika karma. So that sannyasi has no obligation now. He is free from obligation to family and to parents and to ancestors. All obligation he has given up. That's good, Swami. I'd like to become sannyasi. But you must take up a greater obligation. So now your obligation towards the scriptures and teacher and Ishvara, etc. So when the brahmachari has 3 strands, one for Ishvara, one for Guru, one for Shastra. So then the whole duty or whatever you are doing for a number of people all gets focused upon these 3. It is to give a person, when he is ready, the leisure to do, because we need leisure to do this. Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam requires freedom from duties. And so Vedas give consent. If you take sannyasa, no duty. But then there are no rights also, understand. You can't make any demands at all. A sannyas is theoretically give up the claim, all claims, even to the property. I mean, these days people retain their claim, but ideally, a sannyas has no claim on anything. And so he's totally dependent upon the mercy of the world. And because he doesn't have anything, therefore he can go begging food from the society. Vedo Nityam, what is it? It will come in the Sadhana Panchakam. Shudvyadis chikitsatam pratidhanam bhikshaushadam bhujyatam swadvandam nasayacyatam vidivasat praptena santushyatam. Shudvyadis chikitsatam. Says Shankaracharya ji, you must do chikitsa, you must do the treatment of ksudha, means hunger, and vyadi means in case there is an ailment in the body, you should take care of that. Or kshud vyadi, you must treat the vyadi of the nature of ksudha. It's a recurring disease. Hunger is a recurring disease, and therefore bhikshaushadam bhujyadam. For treating this disease, there is aushadam, medicine of the nature of bhiksha. Bhikshaushadam bhujyadam. You go for bhiksha, swadvandam nasuyacyatam. Don't ask for, hey, what have you today? No vada? No, I don't want this. So, you want some favorite food? No, not so in bhiksha. Whatever is given to you, that's what it is. Vidivasat praptena santushyatam. Whatever you get by grace of vidhi or prarabdha, be content. There are rules about that also. Madhukari, like a honey bee goes from one flower to the other, doesn't extract all the honey, it's a little bit. It's all the sannyasi. Madhukari bhiksha goes from several houses, takes a little from each house, but not more than 5 houses. Otherwise I can go on and on until I get what I want, now. So that is the sannyasa. When you are now at the mercy or disposal of Ishvara and the society, and when you go for bhiksha, they can, depends. Hatta katta to hai, you are a healthy person, why are you begging food? Go on, go and work. They can tell you. Or they may give you. Or he says, no, not today. Whatever they want to say. And you should be very, composed and not to react. And even inside also, then give them the freedom to decide what they want to do. So what is sannyasa in today's context? Is same thing. Sannyasa means giving up all your duties supposedly and all ties with the family and with everybody. But ideally, in those days, sannyasi was a loner. In Rishikesh, we have a number of people who have small little kutiyas and they live there. And they go, fortunately, they're annakshetra, so they go 10 o'clock in the morning. And there is a provision, So this is what attracts all the ants, A wrapper, what was inside the wrapper? That's all, that's okay. It'll go away, they will all go away. But I think that you have to keep it in some container from next time. So these days, of course, the sannyasa life is not that difficult. Formerly it was difficult. Now we are nakshetras, so they will serve you food 10 o'clock in the morning. And there are nakshetras which also serve food at 4 o'clock in the evening. So you can have even 2 meals if you wanted. Puja Swami would say, what do you get? In the morning, dal and roti. Evening, roti and dal. In dal, you have to fish out the dal. So they have to again bake the roti and then boil the dal, etc., to make it palatable. That's how it used to be in those days. It may not be so bad now, but the Annakshatra get lots of donations. People just, in India, they love feeding, and so this kind of institute gets lots of donations. And sometimes they give chhatri, and sometimes these. So these things also are given from time to time, some pair of clothes, etc. They try to take care of the sadhus, giving them sometimes a little bottle of oil. So not bad. When we were students, when Puja Swami said that in olden days, the students would go and bring bhiksha for the Guru. Now Guru goes out and brings bhiksha for the students, So things are reversed. That's how it was. Those days it was a little difficult in our times, so the Swami had to work hard to make sure that all the people are, all this. I think when Swami was in Chennai or someplace, and there they brought some mangoes. They say, I was 75, I need at least that many mangoes, Don't give me a few. So,
Swamiji, when there is prosperity, everybody will get, the sannyasis also will get the food. There's a famine-like situation, sannyasis are not looked after.
when there is
Famine-like situation.
famine.
Famine-like.
Mm.
Sannyasis will be affected very much.
But everybody is affected. Not only sannyas, everybody is affected, isn't it? When
This
there is
kind of
COVID.
donations will not come so much.
Yeah. That is true. After all, sannyasa means that you have placed yourself at the mercy of the universe.
Swami, I have a question.
Hmm.
From my understanding, there are two paths to attain the Lord, to attain salvation.
Moksha.
Yeah, one is the service path, where you do service to society, service to Guru, service to nation. The other is bhakti, where you pray to the Lord and recite hymns. My mother, for example, she's 94 years, and every day she recites all the slokas and mantras. Which is a better path with which you can reduce your karma and then attain salvation?
Depends upon your disposition. Some people love this thing, some people love that. So whatever you are comfortable with, whatever you enjoy doing. If you enjoy serving the society, do that. Enjoy worshipping Ishvara, do that. Or do both.
But both paths are equal.
Yes, as long as there is equal dedication. It's dedication which makes them equal, not what they do. But dedication with which they do is what makes them equal. Any other question? Hmm. Right.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hmm.
Swamiji, you were talking about Pitru Yajna now. You were talking about it. just last month, the entire family, we all of us went and we all wanted to do the Pitru karma, everything, starting from Rameshwaram to
Gaya.
Varanasi to Gaya, everything. And then now they told us to bring the Ganga Jal and again take it back to Rameshwaram and finish our rituals. So we have done it totally with lot of Shraddha and Bhakti. And the thing is, like you taught us last year about Ishavasya Idam Sarvam Yat Kinchit. So this particular Yat Kinchit, when we were, they were elaborately doing all the rituals so beautifully. They, the way they chanted, all the mantras, everything, it was beautiful. Finally, Swamiji, it was just, they were just mentioning Yat Kinchit. So I was just wondering, yeah, this is as though, and then, but then, is this ritual that we have been doing with so much Shraddha and Bhakti that we have to do it? You said once we have taken this without any guilt, we have to complete all the. That's what we thought we should do. But why this Yat Kinchit was mentioned in the last, and why did they complete it like that, Swamiji?
Yat kinchit means whatever. Yat kinchit means, here in Ishavasya, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Whatever is in this universe is to be seen as Ishvara. Yat kinchit means whatever little I can do. So, yat kincha is different from yat kinchit.
I mean, like, we had, I mean, like, I thought it was just as though, so it is just, so just as though,
No.
all that we performed was just as though.
No. No, yat kinchit means whatever it is, yeah. Or whatever little I can do.
Dhanyam, Swamiji. Dhanyam.
There, she was there.
Om Swamiji. Swamiji, I suppose knowledge becomes the only means to be free or to attain moksha. Then how can bhakti or karma be a solution for ignorance, Swamiji?
Bhakti and karma become solutions by preparing for knowledge.
Okay, sir.
Om Swamiji. Swamiji, my question is about Shabda Pramana being the only means to understand the knowledge of Brahman or self. So why is it, or what is it unique about the Shabda Pramana that makes it the only means? For example, if a teacher can communicate without using Shabda, for example, through writing, if a teacher can clarify all the doubts of a student, why is it the Shabda Pramana the only means? Or what is the unique factor about the Shabda Pramana?
Writing also is Shabda only. So if you clarify with written words, there are words nevertheless. And by Shabda is basically meant is Vedas or the Upanishad there. Vedanta nam Upanishad Pramanam. Vedanta means Upanishad. And that is Pramanam, that is a means of revealing the true nature of the self. So that you recognize what your true nature is. So Pramanam, or a means of knowledge, reveals what is. For example, your faculty of hearing is Pramanam for you to listen to these words. So Pramanam reveals what is. And Pramanam gives you the knowledge abadhitam, so true knowledge, Pramakaranam Pramanam. In this case, Shabda is called Pramanam because what separates me, it is the knowledge of the self, which is self is already self-effulgent, shining. As you say in the morning, we are aware of the self also. The problem is not awareness of the self. Problem is the wrong notions I have about the self. So here, Shabda is meant to remove those wrong notions, and the self is already self-effulgent. Shabda does not reveal the self. Usually, pramanam is that reveals that object. Like your eyes are pramanam that reveal the color and form. Ears are pramanam that reveal these words. That way, Upan is not the pramanam that reveals the self, because self is self-revealing. In case of Upanishad, the pramana is by way of removing the false knowledge. That's why Shabda works.
If I may ask another question. Swamiji, in terms of Vedanta, Vedanta is the only means to tell about, remove the false notion that we have about oneself. But when we say Veda, it also includes Karma Kanda, where we have certain means and ends which are always not verifiable. So that's why it is a unique pramana, and we have Shraddha in the Veda pramana, therefore we follow it. But how does this pramana, which is where the means and the ends are not verifiable, is again unique to any other beliefs or practices that can be followed in our day-to-day lives?
Where the Vedas become pramana, as you yourself use correctly the expression means and end. So the means are performance of rituals, for example, and maybe, let us say, heaven, Now, end is not known to us, so therefore there is a matter of Shraddha in the pramanam, that when the Vedas say that if you perform this ritual, you will get this outcome. Having Shraddha in that pramana, we do what we do.
How is it different from any other beliefs? For example, if someone comes up with a theory saying that if you eat 32 times a day, you will go to heaven. So how does that belief different from what Veda says in Karma Kanda?
Well, it's a matter of our Shraddha in Vedas, because Veda is looked upon not as composed by human beings, not a product of human mind. Something that is revealed by Ishvara, by Sarvajna or Omniscient, and therefore it is free from errors. On the other hand, when some individual tells you something, it's like every individual intellect is subject to various limitations. Ajnanam can be there, samshaya can be there, vipariyaya can be there, meaning there can be doubt, there can be false notion with reference to the human intellect. But Veda is not a product of human intellect, therefore they are free from these defects. This is called nirdosha pramanam, and that is how we trust. It's a matter of trust. When it comes to karma and karma phala, it's a matter of trust. When it comes to knowledge, it's only trust until you because verifiable. What Upanishads teach is verifiable. What the Karma Kanda teaches is not verifiable in this life.
Swami, in the first sloka today, Mundaka Upanishad, you mentioned that Lord Brahma gave the Brahma Vidya to his son Atharva. But in chapter 4 of Gita, Lord Krishna says that he gave it to the Lord's son, Vivaswan. So there seems to be some confusion.
And there are different traditions coming down to us. That's why I say in the morning, some traditions trace their source to Brahma, some traditions trace their source to Vishnu, some traditions trace their source to Shiva. So all these streams, I guess, we can accept.
Thank
All right, then you can switch off the light and we'll conclude with the bhajan. Narayana Hari Narayana Narayana Hari Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Narayana Hari Narayana. Everybody please join. Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana 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 Narayana Hari Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda 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 Narayana. Everybody please join. Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana Narayana Hari Narayana Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana. 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 Nanda Govinda Ananda Govinda Ananda Govinda Ananda Narayana. Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana. Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana. Nanda Govinda Ananda Narayana. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah. Sarve Santu Niramayah. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhaved. Asato Ma Sadgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amrutangamaya. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.